So I want to thank everybody for joining the latest installment of the FHIR Webinar Wednesday. Today's webinar focuses on our second annual EU Computational Science Symposium. You will hear from some of the co-facilitators of the sessions that will be occurring at the 2017 EU CSS. And my name is Bahlavooni. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the event itself. So it is being held in London on June 19th and 20th at the beautiful Grange Tower Bridge Hotel. For those of you who attended the FHIR annual conference in London, it is at the same hotel as that conference a few years back. It's a lovely venue, and we're looking forward to running some amazing sessions at the, like I said, the second annual EU CSS. So a few dates for you to be aware of. We're actually less than a month away from the event, so there are a few sponsorship opportunities that are still available if your company is interested in sponsoring the event. It was very well attended and very well received last year, and we're hoping for the same for this year. Like I said, there are still some sponsorship opportunities available. We do have a hard cap on the event registration, and we are starting to get close to that cap. So I would encourage you, if you have not registered for the event, to do so at your earliest convenience. There is just a small cost associated with that, which differs a little bit from last year. But again, we are starting to get to our cap on the event, and we would encourage you, if you are interested, to register for the event now. Like I said, the event itself occurs on June 19th and 20th of this year. The registration for those who get into London early, the registration is available on Sunday night, but the event will start in earnest on June 19th and then run through to the 20th. So we will, like I said, hear from all of the co-facilitators of the session today. Here's just a high-level view of the agenda for the EU CSS. So the projects that will be participating in this year's event, we have some overlap with last year's event, so it's nice to have that continuity. We have a few new projects as well. So you'll hear later in today's webinar from each of the co-facilitators. We have an Emerging Trends and Technologies project around the HL7 FHIR. We have Standard Analyses and Code Sharing are going to talk about some of the activities in their working group at the EU CSS. At last year's session, as well as at the FHIR annual conferences, we have sessions on data transparency. That project team will be meeting again as well. We have a couple of projects from the Optimizing the Use of Data Standards working group in the computational science collaboration. At last year's 2016, the first annual EU CSS was the kickoff of the SDTM Atom Implementation FAQ, and that project will be meeting again at this year's session as well. We have some exciting keynote speakers at the event. Crystal Allard from the FDA will be speaking on how FHIR's collaborations assist regulatory review, and we also have Dr. Trish Grove speaking as a keynote as well. The EU CSS, very similar to the USS CSS, offers participants a unique opportunity to engage with the FDA. And at the EU CSS, we'll have participants from the EMA. So it's an excellent opportunity not only for you to engage with your colleagues, but to engage with the regulatory authorities as well. So I'm just going to skip through some of these slides. And again, as I mentioned, one of the kind of hallmarks of our CSS events, whether it's in the EU or in the US, is this opportunity to engage with your colleagues and to collaborate on projects that make a difference to our industry and to patients. And it's, again, a unique opportunity to also engage with folks from the FDA and the EMA as well. So if you haven't registered for the event and you're thinking about it, like I said, we are starting to approach the cap. So I would encourage you, if you like what you hear today from our presenters, to go out and to register for the event. And we will look forward to seeing you in less than a month in lovely London. So I am now going to hand the presentation over to Lukasz, who is the first of our co-leads, and he is going to talk about what to expect from the data transparency project at the EU CSS. So Lukasz, let me hand this over to you.
Okay, could you please confirm that you can hear me and see my screen?
I can hear you and see your screen.
Brilliant. Thank you, Scott. So welcome, everyone. I'm stepping in for Jean-Marc, who is the lead of the Data Transparency Working Group. My name is Lukasz, and we've been working on the number of projects since last year and even way back before that. And we are meeting in June to hopefully push our efforts even further. So very quickly, our group consists of over 20 people from pharma companies, CROs, academia, and so on, and software providers as well. We meet on a monthly basis and discuss a number of issues. Our initial focus was SDTM, and the group came up with a set of standards for de-identifying SDTM. I will come back to that very briefly in a moment. Now we are focusing on the further steps, which is ADAM, as well as looking into EMA Policy 70, its implementation, the challenges that it brings, and how to deal with those challenges. And this is what we will be focusing during the CSS meeting. So our goal, as you can see on this slide, is provide peer-reviewed de-identification standards. We are taking advantage of CDISC standards and all the FHIR discussions to hopefully find the right balance between giving enough guidance to be able to follow the general rules, but also leave enough flexibility for different sponsors to have their fit. So I'm going to skip over that. This is our main deliverable so far. This is the de-identification standards for CDISC and SDTM. It has been released about a couple of years ago now, and it has been downloaded hundreds of times. I can't quite recall the number. I believe it's about 500 distinct people downloaded it. And this standard has been, where are we? Here. This standard has been mentioned and quoted by a number of different publications, including Transcelerate, and EMA Policy 70 is also referring to this document. But that's done and dusted. We are going to maintain that document as SDTM gets upgraded, but our focus for now is doing something similar to the ADAM standards. So we are currently reviewing the de-identification guidance for ADAM. This is going to be one of the topics for our meeting in London next month. The other focus of our group at the moment is the EMA CSR Anonymization Guidance. So this is Policy 70. And there is a number of subgroups under Policy 70 that are currently ongoing. So we are looking at evaluation of risk in CSR. So trying to find out the balance between, sorry, take it back, not finding a balance, finding the best way to evaluate it, be it whether we quantify the risk or qualify the risk, an ongoing discussion. Data utility is something that EMA is putting a lot of emphasis on. This means that they want to see as little de-identification as possible, obviously taking into account data privacy and so on. So we're trying to find ways of quantifying data utility. It's kind of subjective, but we are trying to come up with a scale that we could apply, which would be defendable in front of EMA and others. We are looking at handling of narratives within CSRs. This is a very tricky topic. It's actually relatively simple to handle structured data like data sets and so on when it comes to de-identification, but dealing with natural text is a completely different beast. So we're looking at narratives, how far we want to go with the identification, and how much we want to sort of push back on EMA and say, we can only go so far. And finally, EMA has now released 20 CSRs on their website under Policy 70. And one of the goals we've got is reviewing those published CSRs on an ongoing basis. We came up with some criteria that we are going to apply to those reviews, and we will put it in some kind of spreadsheet where users will be able to summarize information from those published CSRs, not necessarily what they discuss, but rather the approach that is taken to de-identification and different parameters of de-identification applied in those CSRs. So these are the four main topics when it comes to Policy 70. This is the schedule that we are will try to stick to. I'm not going to go in detail through that. It basically meant we are going to have a session on each of those topics that I just discussed. So there's Monday here, Tuesday as well, and that is all I've got. We are looking forward to a lot of discussions, and hopefully we will be finalizing some of those points that I just mentioned, and we will be hopefully able to release some documents or perhaps wiki pages later in the summer. Thank you very much, and I will hand over to Jaga.
Thanks, Lukasz. So Jaga will be presenting on the non-clinical topics working group, which is a larger working group that will be meeting at the EU CSS and discussing some of the finer points of SEND implementation. Okay, Jaga, we can see your screen. I'm not sure if you're on mute.
Yes, no, I was just going to ask if you could see my screen. Thank you very much.
Perfect.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Jaga Virayah, and I am chairing the non-clinical topics session in the FHIR meeting this year together with my co-lead, Chowdhury. The working group's objective is essentially to improve non-clinical assessment and regulatory science through non-clinical data management topics. As Scott mentioned, we are a rather large working group, and we engage collaboratively to provide ideas and solutions to non-clinical data challenges. And we are representing different facets of the industry, from sponsors to vendors to CROs. At the US FHIR meeting in Silver Spring in March this year, we had a working group attendance of close to 100 people, working on all our different projects and topics. At the upcoming meeting in London, we are going to be focused on the following topics. We have 5 sessions that will be going on, and based on the discussions and engagement that we had from the FHIR meeting in the US, we've realized that the visualization topic is now a hot topic for a lot of people in the non-clinical industry. Since a lot of our colleagues have now progressed further into various stages of SEND implementation, naturally the next question is coming down to, so how, aside from submitting this data to the FDA, how could we use it for visualization to support our data analysis, and also to review our data quality and to check for consistencies between the data and the reports. As such, we are having 2 sessions dedicated to visualization topics. We will be also having a session on supporting documents for SEND submissions, and a key session would be on the SEND regulatory overview and feedback. And we'll be concluding with some identification of European hot topics. I'm just going to go through a few slides to say a few words about each of these. The first visualization session would be focused very much on the sponsor's point of view, how a company is going about trying to visualize their SEND data, analyze their SEND data, and check for the data quality. And they'll be presenting real-life use cases from various companies, what kind of selection criteria did they use, and also highlighting current gaps and challenges in the standards and as well as in tools that are out there. The second visualization session would be then coming more from the system provider's point of view. They would get the chance to present their system capabilities, and there's been a lot of work going on in including new features, interactive graphic objects, and they will get a chance to present this and also highlight to the audience and to the participants what can we expect in terms of roadmap. Then we will be moving on to the SEN regulatory overview and feedback. This will be a key session for the non-clinical topics group. We will be having a keynote presentation from Lilium Rosario. Some of you might know Lilium. She is the director at the Office of Computational Sciences, and she will be doing a presentation to talk to us about non-clinical data standards, how is the FDA pulling it all together, what kind of data flows is the FDA using in their data review processes, etc. This will then be followed up with a fit for use pilot presentation. Some of you might be aware of this. This is a pilot that was run last year collaboratively between FHIR, CDISC, FDA, and members of sponsor companies, where 13 sponsor companies submitted real-life SEN data to the FDA for review and feedback. And there was a lot of constructive feedback given to the industry, which has been shared. And this will be a chance for you to get some knowledge into what kind of information the FDA gave back to the sponsors. We'll then be moving on to the supporting documents for SEND. As a lot of people involved in this topic might already be aware, it's more than just preparing data in the standard forms. There's a lot of supporting documents that are required to make a successful submission. The non-clinical study data reviewers guide being one, the defined XML being another, and the study data standardization plan, which is more for the overall submission, but still a key role, is the last one. We will have presentations from various sponsor companies highlighting their experiences preparing for these documents and in coordinating the various activities in their own companies. We will then be closing up with a presentation and a walkthrough of all the existing working groups that are going on that have been formed as part of the US FHIR groups. And we'd like to identify together with our attendees whether there would be any working group that would be beneficial for our EU community. And we will then brainstorm on how we can put that into effect. So that is essentially what we are hoping to discuss and have a good debate over at the FHIR sessions. I'd just like to highlight here again that if you have any questions or any information that you require, please feel free to reach out to us, the co-leads. And I would also like to encourage those of you on the fence to perhaps really consider registering before the registration closes and to join us at the FHIR in London. Thank you.
Thanks, Jaga. So I should mention with you, as we hand over to our next presenter, Trisha, who will talk about the Emerging Trends and Technologies FHIR project, that if you do have any questions for our presenters, please type them into the GoToWebinar functionality, and we will address those if there's time at the end of the session. Okay, Trisha, we can see your presentation.
Okay, thank you. So our group, which we've shortened the name to the Research on FHIR, met for the first time at the CSS in Silver Spring earlier this year. And we had a lot to talk about, and it was a very passionate group. So what we decided to do was to look or use synthetic EHR data, which was created by a group called MITRE in Boston. And the data is freely available on GitHub. So right now we have downloaded, I think 200 patients worth of data at this point, and we're combing through it. We downloaded both the FHIR format and CSV formats. Oh, and I forgot to say, we do meet weekly. We are trying to get our white paper out by the October conference. So we have a lot of work to do between now and then. But what we want to do with the synthetic mass data is to populate SDTM data sets. And we're using the CDISC Diabetes Therapeutic Area User Guide to determine what data we want to download from the EHR data. And as part of our deliverable, we're going to produce an annotated CRF, which will show not only the SDTM annotations, but the C- annotations, and hopefully it will show the mappings from the FHIR data. At this point, we have not figured out how we're going to do that. That's part of the fun of this project. We're sort of building the plane as we're flying, but that will be part of the deliverable along with the white paper. So why do we want to do this? I think we all know that EHR data is somewhat of a holy grail for clinical research, and really no one has figured out a way to easily tap into it for a clinical trial. So we're hoping this project will help blaze the trail, so to speak. And we realize that FHIR resources are probably as close to CRF structure as we're going to get with EHRs. So that's why we're concentrating on FHIR. And we want to use this as a stepping stone. Ultimately, we would like to push industry and healthcare as a whole to have bidirectional communication between the EHR database and an EDC database. I know that that is far into the future, but hopefully not as far into the future as it once was. So please join us. If you have a burning passion to improve clinical research, we are going to use all of our sessions at the CSS as working sessions. We will continue where we leave off at our last meeting prior to the CSS. So that probably means we will be mapping data and also working on the paper. But we do welcome anybody who is interested in helping in this effort. I will add one caveat. We are learning as we are going. We are stepping into the great unknown. So if you want to do that and you've got the courage, please join us. So I'm going to hand off now.
Thanks, Trisha. I am going to talk to a few projects in the optimizing the use of, here we go, data standards working group. So you can see my screen, just to confirm.
Yes.
Perfect,
yes,
thank you.
So.
Thanks, Jane. So I'm going to talk to a few projects that are have overlap with the optimizing use of data standards working group. One is directly a project within that working group, and the other has some tangential overlap. So the first is the SDTM ADAM FAQ. This session will be actually facilitated by Chris Price, so I'm just the stand-in today to walk us through what is going to occur at the 2017 EU CSS in that project. So as I mentioned, this project was actually kicked off in earnest at last year's very successful EU CSS. And kind of the purpose of this project is industry really lacks a common knowledge base for SDTM and ADAM implementation issues in clinical research. So let me just kind of qualify that statement a little bit. So I know that there are some groups out there. You could look at LinkedIn. You can do some Google searches for SDTM or ADAM implementation challenges. CDISC has their message boards that are used on and off, but there's really no unified platform for getting assistance with SDTM and ADAM implementation issues in clinical research. Now, on the non-clinical side, they have a very successful Send implementation forum and FAQ. So what this project sought to do was to provide that platform for folks that are implementing SDTM and ADAM in a clinical setting to get the same level of support that is currently the folks on the non-clinical side are receiving. So it provides a forum for industry and CDISC and other experts to collaboratively address common challenges with SDTM and ADAM implementations. And one of the unique things about this project is that it's actually co-sponsored by CDISC, and we have people that are official CDISC liaisons to this project. So any questions or issues or challenges that people have that come into this project team that this project team is addressing has an official hook into CDISC and has official sponsorship to CDISC. So I know that at times if I'm Googling something, whether it's related to standards implementation or just how to make dinner, sometimes the advice I might get may or may not be the correct answer. So I think with this project, we're attempting to, by having a community come together and address challenges, we can give an answer that people feel comfortable with on the CDISC side. Other people have weighed in on as well. So I think if people then go and use these answers, much in the same way that Lukasz mentioned about using the data transparency recommendations, you can feel confident that this implementation will meet any sort of CDISC business rules or other challenges within your organization. So this project is broken down into 4 very, very active subteams. If you go out to the FHIR wiki and look at the participation in these subteams, there's anywhere from 20 to 40 people participating. So it's a very active group, which I'm very encouraged by. So the 4 different subteams that are currently part of this project are implementation guide nuances. And what that subteam addresses is some of the gray areas or the ambiguity in the implementation guides for SDTM and ADAM. So if there are certain things where you could do it one of a number of different ways, this subteam looks to try to provide a more unified way of implementing SDTM or ADAM. There is a validation and conformance rule subteam, and what that subteam is looking at is how to address some of the issues that arise when running validation or conformance reports on SDTM or ADAM and how to document those in an effective manner. The data submissions subteam is looking at issues around submitting standardized data to regulatory authorities, whether it's the FDA or PMDA, and just some challenges that are common challenges that folks have in that space. And then finally, the trial design domain subteam is looking at questions or issues that folks are having around developing trial design data sets. So I know that there are a lot of ambiguities in that space and a lot of different ways to represent information in trial design data sets. So this subteam is looking at some best practices and some recommendations for common challenges that folks are having in that space. So at the EU CSS, as I mentioned, Chris Price will be the primary facilitator of those sessions. I will be helping Chris in some to be determined capacity, but we are looking forward to Chris actually leading those sessions. So the agenda for those sessions for around the SDTM ADAM FAQ are to provide an overview and update of the project thus far. So the project teams are preparing to publish sort of their first set of best practices and recommendations to the public. They are currently under review in the FHIR steering committee, and they should be published actually before the EU CSS. So for those of you that are interested in attending these sessions, it's a good opportunity during this introductory piece to at least understand what the project teams have addressed already, how they've addressed them, and sort of the framework for doing so. So it's a good opportunity to kind of get that high-level overview of the project. And then we are fortunate enough in this session to have a guest speaker from CDISC who will actually talk to the 2017-2018 roadmap for CDISC. We know that we've heard that there are a new version of SDTM that is coming. The SDTM model version 1.6 was put out for public review yesterday. There is a new version of CDASH that is in the works as well. So again, our CDISC speaker, we're very fortunate to have him attending this session and being able to give us as implementers an idea of what's coming over the next year so we can make decisions within our own companies as well as sort of be on the forefront of what's coming. And then, as I mentioned, really the point of this project is to address common implementation issues in the clinical space for SDTM and ADAM. So we want to have a roundtable discussion focused around your issues. So people still need help implementing the standards. That was very apparent at the US CSS from some of the questions in the panel discussion at the end, as well as the ongoing discussions within the Optimizing the Use of Data Standards Working Group. So for people that are interested in attending these sessions, you don't get to sit there and be silent. We want you to think in advance. You need help in your organization doing what around SDTM or ADAM. So we're hoping to have a very interesting discussion around ongoing challenges that folks are having. And then what we want to do from that discussion is there are certain questions that are still in the queue for this project that have been received from the general public. We want to look at those questions that are in the queue, as well as some issues that come out of this roundtable discussion, and meld them together and then break out into smaller groups, so hopefully like 5 to 7 folks, and just work on some of those questions. So that's really what we're going to do after this roundtable discussion. And then we'll come back together as a larger group and just sort of summarize what we heard in our smaller breakouts, what the questions were, how we think we can solve them, and then come up with some next steps to take our responses back to the larger project team. As I mentioned, this project team, this project as a whole, is very active. The subgroups are very active. So I think we have a really unique opportunity at the EU CSS to kind of continue those discussions, continue to help people that are implementing SDTM and ADAM, and hopefully implement a standard in a more standard way, if you will. So that is that session. Hopefully, if you're interested, as Trisha mentioned, it's a great time to get involved, and as registration starts to fill up, if you are interested in that session, we encourage you to join that now. So I'm going to talk to a second project that is meeting at the EU CSS. It has overlap with the Optimizing the Use of Data Standards Working Group. It's a sort of an add-on to some work that we had done at the US CSS in the Emerging Trends in Technology Linked Data Project. And what we're calling this is Reimagining Clinical Data. So if you think about the way that we actually think about the world, it's not in a tabular row and column format. This is an image of a neural network. So we think in connected points, and we have a lot of relationships between our thoughts. It's not always very linear. So if you think about the world that we live in, it's also very interconnected, whether it's your smartphone allowing you to connect with your friends on Facebook, your colleagues on LinkedIn, or other social media outlets, having your smartphones connected to your laptops, having just a lot of interconnectivity in our world. It's not just this very linear, very rectangular world that we live in. It's very multidimensional. So if you think about the way that we work, we kind of also work in that multidimensional space. So if you think about the way that we collect data, or the way if you go to the physician's office and you report what ailments you may be having to your physician, it's you're reporting, well, I'm feeling sick. This is the medication that I'm taking. This is when I started to feel a little bit under the weather. And if we think about the way that we're collecting assessments from patients, or imagining assessments from patients, it's very interconnected and very multidimensional, if you will. But then at the end of the day, we always go back to this. We always just cram our data in these rows and columns, and then we have challenges around our standards implementation, which is why we have this Optimizing Use of Data Standards Working Group. We have challenges in the way that we implement our non-clinical data, which is why we have the SEND Implementation Forum. But for the last 20 or 30 years in the pharmaceutical industry and biotechnology industries, or device development, we've crammed our data into these rows and columns. When that's the reality of the world that we live in, or the reality of the world that we work in. So we're running this project, and we ran something similar at the US CSS, where we're asking you to kind of think outside the box and reimagine clinical data. What if clinical data looked more like some of those neural networks, or some of those interconnected graphs? So that's what we want to do with this project. Imagine you have a blank slate. What can we do with clinical data to drive our analytics, to actually get more utility and value out of the data that we have sitting on our file server somewhere? So I think there's some overlap here with what Trisha just discussed about the FHIR project, being able to use EHR data and bring it into the clinical research space. And Trisha highlighted some of the challenges in that, and that their project is going to continue to explore that. What if we had a different way of doing things? Would integrating that EHR data be so challenging? Again, we have a clean slate, and we're going to use that clean slate within these sessions. So again, I'm going to be facilitating these sessions. The agenda is really just to kind of look at, what is the problem space that we're talking about? I mean, I think if folks have worked with clinical data, whether it was, in a pre-CDISC world or in a CDISC world, that we always hear about these challenges that we have analyzing data or working with data. So we're going to explore a problem statement around some challenges working with tabular data. And then we're actually going to walk through a demo that came out of a US CSS where we, like I said, we went through a similar exercise and we had folks reimagining a few SDTM data sets, and we were actually able to show in a tangible way how representing data differently gives you some advantages over the current way that we work with clinical data. And let me give you an example. So imagine you are working with clinical data and somebody asks you, Scott, can you tell me all of the clinical trials that in my company for which we had a placebo control arm? So if somebody came to me and asked me how to do that today, I would need to go to a bunch of file servers, look through a bunch of SAS data sets, try to figure out how drugs were labeled as placebos. Hopefully, fingers crossed, integrate that data within less than a month or two, and then be able to provide a response to the person that asked the question. If I was to actually have that data represented differently, that question could be something as simple as a click of a button, a simple query, and we actually showed that during the US CSS. So we're going to walk through another demonstration where we'll show you that some of the challenges that we have working with our data today, we really don't need to have those. We could actually make things a lot easier. And then sort of the meat of the session is we're going to actually ask those that sign up, and I hope I'm not scaring you away, to do a hands-on exercise and do a breakout into groups of 3 to 5 people, depending how many folks sign up for the session. We'll give you some SDTM data sets and ask you to go away and think about how you could represent this information differently that might allow you to answer questions more quickly or might allow you to do some more advanced analytics than we can do today. And we'll come back together, talk about what we've done, and do a walkthrough of what people's thought processes were, if people see the value in working with clinical data differently, or if perhaps I'm just completely off my rocker, which might be the case as well. And then we'll summarize this and talk through some next steps. We'll have a similar session around linked data and clinical data at the FHIR annual conference. So this is, again, a really good way for folks to, similar to Trisha's project, is to be brave and be courageous and be able to think outside the box, think outside the rows and columns. So that those are the 2 sessions that I am here to talk about. So I am now going to pass this over to Shafi and allow him to talk about the standard code sharing and analysis project that will be at the EU CSS. So Shafi, we can see your screen. Are you on mute?
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Perfect. Yep, that's good. Thank you.
Great stuff. Hi, this is Shafi Chowdhury, and what I will be doing is, let's see if we can get this in. Right. So I will be chairing the standard analysis and code sharing group. Now, one of the things that we have is that we have standards for like the trial design for data collection, observed data sets, and analysis data sets, but we actually don't have any agreed standards for tables, figures, and listings. And so one of the parts of this group is really to define some standards for this analysis that we can all work towards. And once we've defined those standards, then the idea is that actually let's create some programs to produce those outputs. So the idea is that really we work together as an industry. So both like the pharma industry, CRO, the FDA, the academia. So we all work together to create this repository in GitHub of both scripts of papers which suggest what analysis we should do, and actually of programs and test data, so that we can then use those programs, so the FDA can use those programs, so the industry, whether it's pharma or CRO, we can then share our knowledge, because we're all, let's face it, producing the same demography table. So this is really about actually defining TLF standards and sharing programs which produces those outputs. And as I say, the vision is really from everyone building their own tools to shared tools. Because if we then have standards, we're then in a much better position to share tools and share ideas, share good practices. And let's face it, for every study we have to produce TLFs. So let's standardize this part, and then it will make everyone's lives easier. Now, what we've done is we've actually separated this part into three focus areas. So we've got one part which is the script repository, and there we have again, this is where we have a GitHub, and in there we store all programs. And this doesn't necessarily have to be SAS. It can be SAS, R, it can be any other types of programs that we need. But the main idea is that actually we then store all this in one place, and then everyone can access this area and extract programs and so on as they need to. The other part is, of course, analyze and display white papers. So here, what we're doing is we then produce analysis, which analysis we should do, how we should tabulate them, how we should do the figures. And the idea is then we have a set of defined standards which the industry can work with. And the last part is communication and promotion. So what we need to do is then we need to really make sure that we promote these so that the industry take up these white papers and accept them, or at least provide feedback so that we can update them so that everyone can use them. And once we get to that stage, then people can really use the programs and also the tables and so on straight from the repository. So far, we've actually accomplished 6 analysis and display white papers. So they've been finalized. We still have 4 more that we're working on, and there's some more on the way. And the script repository, it's already been created, and people have contributed already lots of scripts into this hub, and people are downloading them and using them. So that is superb. That's really where we're trying to get to. In terms of the white papers that's been finalized so far, we've done like vital signs, ECG, labs, there's PK analysis, there's demography, disposition, medications. So we have like outliers tables, and this year we finalized the adverse event white paper. So, and you can then go to, there's a link here, so you can go to the FHIR and you can see what has been done so far, and you can download the white papers. So with regards to the plan for EU CSS, what we wanted is we're having 2 sessions, one just before I think lunch, just for afternoon break, and then one after. And in the first session, we will go through the white papers. We'll look at actually what's been done so far, what's in the white papers, discuss some of the ideas for improvement, and also to try and gather new ideas for potential new white papers. In the second session, what we'll do is we'll go through a GitHub demo, and we'll show you actually how you can access the data, to see what's already available, and also how you can contribute scripts. And we'll show you actually how easy it is to access the papers and programs, and hopefully you can then see actually how much time this will save you. And the working group's next steps really are to continue working on the white papers. So as I say, we've got 4 additional white papers which are planned, and 3 we are going to update. With the script repository, we're again trying to make sure we get lots of feedback on those. And again, it's only as good as what we put in. So we're really trying to crowdsource like the scripts, programs you have for the different types of tables and listings and figures. The other thing is we're going to continue our work on test data factory project, and this is really a pilot to try to create CD standard data that everyone can use for different purposes. It's very difficult. It's quite complex to create test data for your purpose. So you can always have some very generic test data, but how do you create some test data for a specific purpose of testing? So this group is really looking at how we can create test data for use in different situations. And the other one is that we want to continue work on, as I said, promotion, education. We want to try to promote the white papers. We want to try to promote a GitHub so that people get used to seeing the table shells and seeing, yes, there's already a program to produce this, which is already there that they can use. So these are the next steps that we're really trying to work on. And how you can participate, well, we'd really like you to sign up to our working group and help us to actually review the white papers, to help write the white papers, to define standards. And as I say, also to look at our scripts to see how we can improve that, how we can communicate the information, how we can really improve the whole idea of sharing and working, not as individuals or as companies, but really as an industry. So the main aim for this is really to look at where we are, define some standards for TLFs, create some generic programs which will work for those, which will produce those TLFs, and then the whole industry can benefit. And as I say, hopefully you can come and participate in this group. So I will pass you back to Scott.
Thanks, Shafi. So hopefully that piqued your interest in what's happening in at the EU CSS this year. Again, we are starting to get close to the cap for registration. I just want to remind folks of some of these key dates. The registration is currently open, and again, we do have a hard cap. The event itself will be on June 19th and 20th with a opportunity to register and pick up your badges on Sunday the 18th. Again, there's a lot of activities that are going on at the EU CSS that can make a difference within industry and the regulatory space. It is a unique opportunity to engage with regulators from the FDA as well as the EMA. So we hope that you've heard enough today to pique your interest and we'll go out and register. So I want to thank you for your time and look forward to seeing you in June. Thanks, everyone.